Why is the Igbo nation returning to Odinala? Why are many young people who are Ndi Ìgbò, both men and women, returning back to the ancient ways of our ancestors? Why is there a renewed, energetic, passionate resurgence of many young people who are coming back to Odinala? We see all over social media where people are offering sacrifices in waters, people are offering sacrifices to their ancestors. There are lots of dibias coming online to teach about Odinala Igbo, our language, our spirituality, our culture, all of that. For those who do not, who this took by surprise, it's important for us to know where we are going to and what is happening in Igbo land. Now, what we're experiencing currently is a revolution. The Igbo nation has been on a revolution in the past, I would say, more than 100 years. But each time a revolution comes up, it dies down. A new revolution now resurfaces. The current march to Odinala, where everybody's saying, go back to our roots, I want to know my ancestors, I want to offer sacrifices to my chi, Agwu, and all of that is coming from somewhere. So where is that coming from? Now, there are 5 major revolutions which the Igbo nation has undergone in the past almost 200 years. Now, before I get down to the real reason why we're going back to Odinala, I want to enlighten us on where all of this started. Now, the first time Ndi Ìgbò encountered European missionaries was around 1841. And from 1841, they first came, they had some emergency sicknesses, and then they left. Many of them died, they left. Then they came back in 1857. And since they came back, they continuously worked on dismantling the Igbo worldview, the Igbo spirituality, Igbo Odinala, and everything that holds Ndi Ìgbò together and what makes us Ndi Ìgbò. So these missionaries started preaching. While they were preaching and trying to convert our people, sometimes by force, the British colonial officers themselves did a lot of things to suppress Ndi Ìgbò. And this suppression of Ndi Ìgbò continued. Men were conscripted into carrying white people on their shoulders as hammocks. If you are not a Christian, certain labors will be given to you. If you're not a Christian, certain taxes will be taken from you. All of these things continued up until around the 1870s, 1880s, when the Ekumeku rose up against the British. The Ekumeku rose up and fought a deadly war with the British for around 31 years, for almost 31 years. And while the Ekumeku were confronting the British, because the British came to our towns, Igbo towns, tried to convert people by force. And when those people resisted or tried to, I would say, push back the white missionaries, sometimes they had altercations, differences. White missionaries were beaten or something. Then they brought back soldiers to begin to kill Ndi Ìgbò. And then the Ekumeku resistance started, which lasted for 31 years. Now, by the time the Ekumeku resistance was ending towards the 1900s, also we had the Aro people, the Aro Chukwu. They fought with the British, because the British too demonized the Ubini Ukpabi, which is the oracle, the deity of the Aro Chukwu people, and tried to suppress the Aro Chukwu influence, because the Aro Chukwu they were influential in trade, in governance, in politics in Igbo land. Now, all of these things made the British try to suppress that hold the Aro Chukwu had. And in doing that, they also went to a lot of parts of Igbo land, tried to suppress our spirituality, our worldview, our language, and a whole lot, our culture. They told things about polygamy. They said polygamy was wrong. Told men to start marrying only one wives. If you were a chief and you had 2 wives, they would tell you, for you to convert to Christianity, you had to marry, you have to leave one wife and be with one. Things like that. They continued to oppress Ndi Ìgbò, tried to dismantle those things, those worldviews and spiritualities that held us together. So what happened? They faced resistance. So this was the first resistance that the British faced. Now, that resistance led to the second resistance, which was the Aba Women's Riot, Aba Women's War, around 1929. Mind you, before now, there has been pockets of resistances, people trying to seek independence, and all of that. People speaking up against British brutality, colonial brutality in Igbo land. Now, the Aba Women's Riot would coincide with the fight for independence. After the Aba Women's Riot, the world now knew about Ndi Ìgbò and their determination to resist any foreign oppression. That was how the British knew that, we fought these people during the Ekumeku. We fought them at Arochukwu. Many of their towns and villages resisted our evangelicals and our missionaries, and also resisted our political systems. They are meeting the Igbo people for the second time, the second phase of the revolution, which is the Aba Women's Riot and the fight for independence. That fight for independence had Nnamdi Azikiwe as one of the leading figures of that fight for independence. This made the British to, these people are something else. At this point, when Nnamdi Kanu was among those who were fighting for independence, the Igbo nation entirely were actively against British oppression, British rule. There was a national consciousness among Ndi Ìgbò that we don't want these people. And this continued till Nigeria got independence. But however, after Nigeria got independence, Ndi Ìgbò kept on being oppressed. This time around, it was by their own brothers and sisters. This led to the Biafran War. The Biafran War is the third in the list of revolutions which Ndi Ìgbò carried out to defend themselves. After the pogroms in the north in 1966, Ndi Ìgbò came back, declared Biafra with others, and Nigerian government with the British, which we had been fighting earlier, came back to start killing Ndi Ìgbò. Ndi Ìgbò fought for 3 whole years to defend themselves, to defend their cultures, to defend that thing which holds us together as a people, to defend our lives. For 3 good years, we fought them. When the war ended, the government said no victor, no vanquished, and everybody went their way. But this third revolution now gave birth to a second part of that third revolution, which was Ndi Ìgbò coming out with just 20 pounds and nothing, no money in the bank and all of that, to begin to build back their economy. This now heightened the whole Igbo boy system, where young men were taken into the towns or into the business areas, trained by Igbo men, and then empowered to, to gain financial and economic strength. This is part of that third revolution. And that third revolution saw Ndi Ìgbò rise from just 20 pounds to becoming one of those who controlled the economy of Nigeria. This time around, this revolution was more of an economic revolution. Now, we move forward to the era when there was now a political reawakening, which was around the 1990s and all of that. Despite the fact that Ndi Ìgbò had bounced back economically to a great extent, still, something was lacking. We were not carried along in the political arena of Nigeria. And because of that, we were marginalized socially. Many infrastructures that were supposed to be in Igbo land were not here. The government didn't care about Igbo land. So our people started to ask questions. Why can't, if we are not getting what we're supposed to get from the Nigerian government, why not we continue with the Biafra which we had declared so many years ago? And that was why we had Masop coming up in 1999. Masop came out, declared, wanted Igbo freedom and all of that. That was a political revolution. All of these things were tied to the fact that Ndi Ìgbò do not like being ruled by anybody, do not like being controlled by anybody, do not want their destinies, political, social, cultural, or otherwise, to be controlled by anybody. So, Masop came in 1999. Wazirike arrested and all of that. It continued till 2012 when Nnamdi Kanu came up with IPOB. IPOB was still a movement that wanted to protect Ndi Ìgbò from political oppression, social oppression, wanted a nation where Ndi Ìgbò would have the right to practice their religion, their faith, their spirituality, have a right to their minerals, have a right to dictate who would be their leaders, and all of that. And IPOB, this political reawakening is the 4th revolution which Ndi Ìgbò underwent in the past 200 years. We all know how the whole IPOB agitation has been going, with the Nigerian government continuously trying to suppress Ndi Ìgbò and our voices. Our demands have not been met, and yet the Nigerian government has continued to say IPOB are terrorists. Now, that 4th revolution tied to what I would call a black consciousness. There was a black consciousness that now started to sweep around the world, where We saw history lessons, history articles, history videos of how white people, Caucasians, oppressed our people during slavery. The transatlantic slave trade, how they took our people for slavery, how they oppressed them in their farms. All of these things was now a global reawakening. Both black Americans, both those in the Caribbean, both those in Jamaica, everybody was speaking up and saying, no, 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 no. These things that these people did to our ancestors cannot continue. And despite the fact that they took our ancestors into slavery, they continue to oppress us. Caucasians continue to oppress black nations of the world, even in America and otherwise. So this reawakening within the young people swept down from the United States of America, swept down into Nigeria. And many young people started to question foreign religion, foreign governments, foreign cultures, because all of these things were tied to the same group of people, the same white people who oppressed us during the slave trade and who continue to oppress us. Now, this reawakening now gave rise to people's eyes started opening, started to see that there was a failure of religion. The churches could not, the people could not see that promise that the promise that they were receiving in the churches. There was nothing right about it. You go to the church January to December, there's no economic emancipation, there's no spiritual emancipation. People started to see that the churches, the religious houses were failing them. And so they started to ask questions. If these churches have failed us for over many decades, what can we do? Why not we go back to the ways of our ancestors? This was where the awakening started to become very, very clear. People saw a failure of colonial institutions. Our education was not at par with that which was gotten outside of the country. Many people will go outside the country and school, and they will get better jobs. But in Nigeria, after school, there's no job. So the government had failed the young people. The religion houses had failed the young people. There was all-round failure. The social institutions had failed young people. And therefore, people started to ask, what are we doing with these foreign cultures, foreign ideas, and foreign religions? So people started to say, we would go back to our roots. We would go back to our roots. And that was what led to now a renewed Igbo consciousness, what we would call the Igbo Renaissance. People now started to say we now want to speak our languages more, because many of us were brought up where if you speak your language in the class, you were fined or flogged. If you speak your language in society, people looked at you as someone who is a cake. If you practice your spirituality, Mmụọ, Oji, Nanzunedo, people saw you as an idol worshipper. People now said no. If all of these things that the white people brought to us had failed us entirely, the governments they set up for us have failed us. Our leaders were still conniving with them, and all of that, taking our resources abroad, making the people suffer. If all of these things had failed us, we don't have any other option than to return back to the ways of our people. Return back to the ways of our ancestors, learn our language, wear our clothes, our attires. That's why you saw many young people started to wear Igbo attires to occasions, publicize it, make it a social media trend. People started to teach Igbo language online and offline. People started to promote the Igbo language and the Igbo names and all of that. It went on. People started to say, if I've prayed for 20 years or 30 years of my life and I've not gotten spiritual or social or economic or mental breakthrough, I should go back to my ancestors, offer sacrifice to them, and get that breakthrough. And those who were doing these things were seeing breakthroughs. And so there was this renaissance, which is the fifth revolution in Ndi Ìgbò, going back to Odinala. When we say Odinala, we don't just mean Mmụọ, which is offering sacrifices, killing of animals and all of that. No. Odinala is all encompassive. In a separate video, I'm going to teach what Odinala is and what Omenala is. But then this Igbo Renaissance led Igbo people to seek to replenish that path of us which had been lost to colonialism. Speak the Igbo language, offer sacrifices, do Mmụọ, which is Igbo spirituality. Demand for an autonomy, politically and economically, to have our own country where we decide what happens for us, to demand the return of the ways to our ancestors. All of these things were happening because Ndị Ìgbò were on a path. You must count one before you count two. And as such, we had counted one with the war, the Ekumeku War and the Arrow War, the resistance of the British. We counted 2 with the Aba Women's Riot and the fight for independence. We counted 3 with the Biafran agitation, the Biafran war, genocide, revolution, and the Igbo boy system. We counted 4 with the reawakening, reading of history, IPOB, MASOB, and all of that. And then, all that is a chain that connects to this 5th revolution, where we are now, where the entire Igbo land is returning to Odinala, Omenala, Igbo. Young people now want to come back to the village, participate in masquerade festivals, come back to the village, offer sacrifices to the deities of their ancestors, come back to the village, know about the waters in their village, know about the boundaries of their village, read up the resources they have in Igbo land, like a research I made about the oil and gas that we had in Igbo land. All the 5 eastern states have oil and gas and other minerals, which if we had a separate country of our own where we controlled our holidays that are tied to our spirituality, our Ndi Ị, special holidays, we also control how we will milk our own resources, oil and gas. We control who we sell to. We control the type of money we have. We control our economy. We control jobs. Our young men have jobs. They will no longer have to languish in prisons and die at the desert or the Sahara or on the ocean. Control economy where there are lots of jobs, where our young men and young women will not have to go into prostitution and other forms of illicit crime. All of that is where we are going to as Ndi Ìgbò. And for me, it is all encompassing. When we say Odinala, we don't just mean slaughtering of animals. We mean everything that has to do with the Igbo worldview. Odinala means Igbo worldview, cosmology, and spirituality. It's Igbo more that is spirituality part of it. But everything we do as Ndi Ìgbò is Odinala. So that is where we are today. That is where we are today. And the Igbo nation, as we are marching, we see that our continuous teaching of Odinala on online and offline is provoking some people. Who is it provoking? It's provoking the state actors, our political elite, who know that what we are demanding for is going to lead us to become free. We would eventually come out of the churches and know that there is no power, there is no salvation in the churches. Praying from January to December is not going to give us economic emancipation. It's not going to give us spiritual emancipation. Many people who have been in the churches for many years, having mental problems, having spiritual problems, having financial problems, came back to Odinala, Mmụọ, and offered sacrifices aligned with the spirits and pantheons of their fathers and mothers' land. And they got breakthroughs. That one is certain. Is not easy. It can't be argued. Many people have also come back to that same village where they told them that it's an evil place, have settled down, started to do agriculture, know what their land can manufacture, and through that these people have been empowered financially rather than living in cities and working 9 to 5 and getting peanuts. It is in the same line to understand who we are in Odinala that people like Nnamdi Kanu started to talk about Nri and the ancient parts of Igbo land where how Ndi Ìgbò dispersed and how we are tied to those places spiritually. All of these things were what the foreigners, colonial masters saw, and then informed those who they placed as our governors and presidents and what her senators to begin to now suppress what the Igbo Renaissance. That's why we see laws, the recent laws in Anambra State where the governor said you can't go to the water, you can't offer sacrifices. All of that is not because those things are really, they are not against the law. They just they don't want to give us our own Igbo nation. They want us to be everly dependent on the Nigerian system. That way, they will keep keeping us as third-class citizens. They don't also want us to connect spiritually to the pantheons of our father's land, because they know whoever is connected to the spirituality of his father's land would see the power and truth in that spirituality and would jettison religion. And these people know that religion and the government work hand in hand. The churches and the governments work hand in hand to keep us perpetually in need, to keep us perpetually coming to them to beg them. You need a job, you go and beg your senator or your governor, or you beg someone who's connected to politics. You need spiritual help, you go to a pastor who will pray for you all year round, no solution. All of these things are what Ndi Ìgbò saw. The failure of the religious houses, the failure of the government institutions, the failure of the schools, our educational system, the failure of everything that was set up for us as a system of government. All of these things tied to the anger we feel about colonial oppression and the slave trade and the continuous neo-colonial oppression of our people. This is the reason why the Igbo nation is returning to Odinala. And anyone who tells you that coming back to Odinala is coming to do idol worshipping is an enemy, does not understand what Odinala is to us. We are coming back to Odinala to learn our history. We're coming back to Odinala to learn our cultures. We're coming back to Odinala to learn our language. We're coming back to Odinala to learn our land, our topography, our geography. Know your land, know the boundaries, know what you have in your forests, know the economic importance of your land, and all of that. We'll come back to Odinala to learn about our Nzenozo, Mmadụ, Ụmụnna, and a lot of other institutions that we have, which made Igbo people to be the originators of the current democracy which is practiced today. We have the oldest democracy, and it is the best system of government. But a man who runs away from his village and does not come back for 50 years will not know the importance of joining the Ụmụnna, having his wife join the Ụmụnna, having his sisters in Ụmụada, and will not learn of the alo, the things he's supposed to abstain from as a human being. There's a whole lot that Odinala entails, which I will not explain in this video. I will explain in a subsequent video. However, Odinala is the right way for Ndi Ìgbò to go if we must become the people who Chukwu Okike Abiama created us to be. We must return to Odinala to be able to harness our spiritual potential, economic potential, social potential, cultural potential, metaphysical potential, and all forms of potential which Ndi Nandana has endowed us with. So, if you are someone who is skeptical about coming back to Odinala and sees it as something that is just idol worshipping, I want you to erase that from your mind. Coming back to Odinala is a way for you to know who you are as Onyibo, to know who you are entirely, everything about you. And once you know, they say knowledge is power. Once you know who you are, you will know your place in this world, what to demand of the people of this world, and how to place yourself in the hierarchy of this world. So yes, if you have any questions or any contributions to this particular all-important topic, do your best to comment, like, share. Let us discuss, let us talk about the importance of Odinala for Ndi Ìgbò and how it is going to help us shape our destiny as a people. I remain my humble self, Chukan Dunesoku, of Voice of the Sun. With this, we'll come to the end of this particular video episode. Ekenekwa mono, demenodalo.